Hi, I'm Dr. Tronél Hellberg, and in this video, I'm going to look at the didactics of melody writing. Now, for so many learners, melody writing is a giant, difficult task, and I hope to assist you as teachers in this video clip to teach melody writing from a more practical perspective. So why do the learners often struggle with this component? I think firstly, there's a lack of oral awareness, like really developing a good, solid ear when writing or rather composing melodies. And then for many learners, but also teachers, melody writing is so frequently seen as that exam component. So it's just to pass an exam, and after the exam, we don't worry about melody writing again. And then the last reason I think that contributes to this challenge is that melody writing is so often taught from writing to sounding instead of sounding to writing. And let's have a look at a practical approach that can help us fix this problem and also help learners to really enjoy melody writing. So I'm going to share my screen with you. Okay. So the first thing that we need to focus on is right from the beginning. So from grade 10 or even earlier, we need to really place significant emphasis on practical integration. So learners need to be encouraged to play the melodies on the instruments or on the piano, especially if they don't play a melodic instrument. And they need to get used to where the notes are. They need to develop at least relative pitch. I'm not talking about perfect pitch, but relative pitch. And also getting to know how the various instruments sound. So how do we develop this oral awareness? So we do it by focusing on oral training, on solfege, teaching the learner solfege, interval recognition, and of course there's also the traditional way of teaching intervals by interval association through opening notes of songs, teaching them various songs with different intervals. So that's also one way to get used to various intervals. And then to teach them the essence of key. What is key all about? And we are going to look at that also a bit later, but they need to understand that the tonic is the most important note of any major and minor, and all notes are heard in relation to the tonic. Then, of course, there's the important aspect of dictation, okay? That learners listen to a melody and then they need to write it down. Now let's have a look at the method for teaching melody writing. Now, from the beginning, it's your responsibility as the teacher to empower your learners with a sense of, yes, I can do this. It must really feel easy for your learners, and it shouldn't be like this huge mountain in front of them, this really daunting task. So let's have a look at some exercises that you can do with your grade 10 learners. Now, the first exercise that I would suggest to really make it easy, that it's not a daunting task for them, is to play them one bar motive, and then just in their imagination, they need to add a one bar response. And you need to tell the learners to have, or their response should start with a step above or below the last note of this motive. And then finally, when their sense of interval gets better, they can start their response with a leap. Then, as a second exercise, I can suggest that you use the same motive, and then they need to notate the response that they imagined. Or another way of doing it is to play them the motive, and that you can see in exercise 3, and then imagine playing the answer on the instrument or on the piano. Another way of doing it is to play this motive and then have them play the imagined answer on the instrument or on the piano. And then another way of doing it is to provide the learners with a written opening. As you know, that is the way it's done in an exam, to provide them with this written opening, and then see if they can actually accurately interpret it by singing or playing this opening. And of course, it's not important that the key must be exact. So if it's a major, as long as they sing in a major, that is fine. Of course, the learners with perfect pitch would actually be able to pitch the notes correctly, but that's not all important. It's more that they can accurately interpret what they see on paper. Okay. Now, to do that, it's important that they take note of the key signature and, from there see, is this opening in a major or is it in the relative minor? And then place the notes of this opening in relation to the tonic of that particular key. Okay, and I've seen from my own experience so often learners struggle with this, that what they hear is not actually what is written. So you have to make sure that learners develop an accurate sense of pitch and interpreting the sound of the notation. Okay, now once this foundation has been laid, you can start extending your motive to a 2-bar call and 2-bar response. Then you can start integrating arpeggios, and that's how we gradually start to move towards integrating intervals. And then after that, we can start adding a response or we can have a response that starts with an interval. Okay, and then learners would be able to get that leap right. Okay, and then it's only after your learners have this solid awareness of pitch that they can start writing melodies without the instruments. And so there's a lot of focus for me on the practical component before we actually get to writing it. And again, focus on the fun of it. It should be like a game to see how accurate you can portray your melody, or write the melody down what you have heard in your imagination. So it should be fun. Okay, it shouldn't be a daunting task, and if they make mistakes, it's really, really fine. Now let's quickly have a look at the preparation for writing down a melody. And I think just before I go there, I would like to just emphasize that if your learners' oral awareness have been well developed, it's almost not necessary to teach them what sounds good and what sounds bad. So to tell them these are the rules. For example, the treatment of the leading tone, or not having too many consecutive leaps, or having a leap and then a step in the opposite direction, all those kinds of rules. Okay, but however, these rules still need to be taught to them. And for example, in my grade 10 book, and also in the other books, but in my grade 10 book, I really break down all the various rules, and in grade 11 and 12, I just provide a quick summary of them. And a good exercise here that you can also do is to play excerpts to your learners. Now, I also have some of these in my books where you demonstrate good and, let's call it, bad sounding melodies or motives. And then they can hear, oh, okay, this is not just a rule. The rule is there because if you don't do it, it really sounds horrible. Okay, so let's have a look at how we're going to write down our melody. Okay, now it's very important to have a visual structure. The moment you have a visual structure, and by that I mean to have your bars, your phrases written in, it just makes it feel more doable for your learners. Okay, so in preparation for writing our melody, we are first going to add the clef and the key signature to the staves. Then, of course, if there's going to be a modulation, you're going to indicate this by means of a key signature, a key signature change, or you can just do it by means of accidentals. Then the learners need to draw their bar lines. Now, this is if it's necessary, depending on the paper, maybe there's already bar lines added to the piece. Important because learners sometimes forget to do this. You need to make them aware of the fact that they need to write down, to also draw the final bar line. Then the next step is to add phrase marks, okay, because then they know where their musical sentences lie. And then after that, tell them in the last bar, they must just have one long tonic note, okay? And they can always move the tonic up or down depending on how the melody sounds and where it ends. But often in my experience, I've seen that learners try and just squeeze in a lot of notes in the last bar, and they don't even end on the tonic, okay? So just tell them, tonic, don't feel guilty about it. Just add one long tonic in the final bar. Of course, they also need to just keep in mind if the opening starts with an upbeat that they adjust the note length of the last bar accordingly. Okay, and then after your melody has been written down, they need to raise the leading tone. And remember, when we write melodies, normally we use the melodic minor scale, but it's not wrong to also use the harmonic minor. And then lastly, they are going to add their dynamics and their articulation. So let's just quickly have a look at the structure and as well as some exercises that you can do with your learners when doing melody writing. Now, if we look at grade 10, so this now comes from my grade 10 book. I discussed the phrase with him that it's a musical sentence and that you have a call and you have a response. And I'm not going to go through all the detail there. I just want you to see how I do it. I give them various examples. I talk about the melodic line and then I give them the rules. So you only give them all these rules. So let's take this one. A leap of a 6 or a 7 should be used sparingly because it's difficult to sing. Okay, so all these rules, you should really just teach that to them after they developed, you know, a good and a solid oral awareness, and that these rules actually come naturally because they know what sounds good and what doesn't sound good. Okay, so let's just quickly have a look at the grade 10 melody. So of course they need to complete a 4-bar melody. And what would happen is the exam paper or the opening of the melody would be 2 bars, and then the learners need to answer the opening motive by adding another 2 bars. So if the last bar is just one long note, they actually just need to add 1 bar. So make it easy, make it doable for your learners. Now let's have a look at grade 11. So in grade 11, they need to complete an 8-bar melody. And here I just want to show you an activity. So I gave the learners an excerpt, and then I asked them questions about it. You know, do the notes go up and down? You know, where are the leaps? Here you can see that I taught them the various intervals by giving them the opening of various songs. And then just do a lot of exercises, developing the oral awareness. Play the complete phrase on your instrument. How close is it to what you imagined it to be? You'll remember that I talked about that earlier. And here they do the same. Give the opening and they add the response. So again, once they've written it, they can ask themselves, does this actually sound nice? Okay, did I end on the tonic? And did my notes move mostly stepwise, or were there a lot of leaps and that just made it sound incongruent? And then were leaps followed by a step in the opposite direction? Yes or no? And of course, if it's not like this and it still sounds good, it is still fine. Okay, and then let's just quickly go into the structure of the 8-bar melody. So you're going to divide it into 2 4-bar phrases. So if we look at the first 4-bar phrase, you will see that in bar 1 we have a motive, and then we have a sequence. Now, depending on the exam paper, only the motive might be given, and then the learners need to add the second bar, which would be then a sequence, or the first and the second bar is given, so then you're not going to worry about this part. Now, this is just one of the methods that you can use. It's not the one and only method, but it's quite easy to use this method. Even my chords, it's not a must that the learners should use this. It's just a suggestion. Okay, so you have a motive, a sequence, and then you answer that in the last 2 bars of that phrase. And then in your next 4-bar phrase, you have a new motive and a sequence of that, and then you answer it. As easy as that. Then if we look at the grade 12 melody, so now they need to write 12 bars. I do a similar example or exercise at the beginning where I give them various extracts and I ask them, does this extract sound good? Does it sound bad? And then we look at why does it sound good, or why doesn't it sound so appealing? Now let's have a look at the structure of it. Just quickly scroll down there. Okay, here we go. Okay, so we're going to do the same here. So we have we're going to have 3 phrases, and all 3 phrases are going to consist of 4 bars. I'd suggest just having you know, 4 plus 4 plus 4 bar phrase structure, not an irregular phrase structure at this stage. So your first 4 bars are going to be in the tonic key, and like you've seen previously, we have a motive, a sequence, and an answer within that phrase. Then if we look at phrase 2, what you can do there is to have a pattern, in other words, your motive for 2 bars, and then a sequence of that. And we can use the dominant key here. So this is now if the question requires the learners to modulate. And then the sequence is in the subdominant key. And then our last phrase, what we can do here, and this is quite handy, is for the first 2 bars, we're going to use bar 1 and 2 of our first phrase. So it's basically just a repeat. And then the last 2 bars, we are going to transpose bar 1 and 2 of our second phrase. And of course, the second bar is actually not even going to be there, because it's going to be the final bar, in other words, just one long tonic. Okay, so yes, this is my method for writing melodies, and I trust that it helped you and that your learners will develop really a solid ear, and from there that you will move on to the more theoretical stuff and wean them off playing with the instruments or sitting with the instruments while playing and composing the melodies, until they are able to just write down what they hear in the imagination, because like we all know, in the real exam, they're not going to sit with the instruments. Okay, and that is my recipe that I wanted to share with you for teaching melody writing.